Okay, this is Algebra Lesson 6.5, Linear Inequalities, and our objective today is to graph and solve linear inequalities that have two variables in them. A linear inequality is kind of like a linear equation, which you've been working with in Chapter 5, but this time we have, instead of an equal sign, we have an inequality sign, and so that's kind of like Chapter 3 where we were working on inequalities. And then the solution to a linear inequality is any ordered pair that we can plug in for x and y that makes our inequality true. So let's see if they gave us this problem. They give us this ordered pair. Why isn't it drawing? They give us this ordered pair, and then they give us this inequality. Okay, so the ordered pair, first number is always x, second number is y. And then they give us this inequality. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in 4 for y. So instead of y, we're going to put in 4. And then instead of x, we're going to put in -2. Okay? And then we'll solve it. So 2 times -2 is -4 plus 1. Remember, we have to do PEMDAS, so you have to do your multiplication first. And then -4 plus 1 is -3. Okay, is 4 smaller than -3? No, 4 is not smaller than -3. It's not less than -3. So no, it's not true. Okay, which means that this is not a solution. Okay, pause the video and get all that copied down. All right, well, let's see how this one works out. Here's the ordered pair that they gave us, and there is the inequality. Okay, so the ordered pair, x, y. So now we'll plug them in. So instead of y, we plug in 1, and instead of x, we plug in 3. So is 1 greater than 3 minus 4? That's -1. Is 1 bigger than -1? Yes. That's true. So that would mean that this point, when we plug it in, it makes our inequality be true. So this is a solution. Cool. A linear inequality describes a region of the coordinate plane. So if we're graphing, it describes part of that graph, which is called a half plane. And all the points in that half plane are solutions to the inequality. So all the points that are inside that half plane are things that we could plug in to make our inequality be true. And the boundary line, or the line that we've graphed, is the region of the graph of the region is the graph of the related equation. That's a lot of words. Let's just look at this. So they have this big chart here, and I don't want to read it to you, but why don't you pause the video for a second and read it to yourself. And if you can't read it on your screen, then it's in the book under Lesson 6.5, so you could get out the textbook and look up Lesson 6.5 and read it there. So we have some steps when we do linear inequalities. Step 1, solve it for y. Okay, so get it to be y equals. Get it to be like y equals mx plus b. Step 2, graph the line. If we have the less than or equal to sign or the greater than or equal to sign, then we make a solid line. And if it's just a less than or a greater than sign, then we make a dashed line, like that. Okay, so these ones are like that, and these ones are like that. And then we shade above or below our inequality signs. So if we've got greater than signs, we shade above the line that we just drew. And if we've got less than signs, then we shade below the line. And then step 4 would be to check the answer. Okay, so let's do this one. Y is less than or equal to 2x minus 3. So step 1 would have been to solve for y, but they've already done that for us. It already says y on one side and then everything else on the other side. So that's already done. Step 2, graph. Okay, this is just like graphing any other line that you're used to. So first you look at the y-intercept. It's at -3. So we go to -3 on our graph and we put a dot. And then we look at our slope. Our slope is 2 over 1. So from this dot, we go up 2, and then we go to the right 1, and we put another dot. And now we have to connect the dots, but we don't know, are we going to use a solid line or are we going to use a dotted line? So that's when you look at the inequality sign right here. If it's got the equal to line underneath it, okay, equal to line, that's kind of like a solid line. So you want to make a solid line in between your two dots, like this. Okay? Step 3, now we get to shade it in. This is like coloring, so it's kind of fun. See how y is less than. Okay, the alligator is pointing away from the y. So y is smaller than all the rest of this. So since y is smaller than, we're going to shade everything underneath this line. So we start at the line and we just go down from it. We shade that in. Don't color it too dark because then you won't be able to see whatever's underneath there. But just color it a little bit. And then step 4, we're going to check to make sure we did our math right. So you just look inside this shaded region and you pick any point that's in there. It doesn't matter which point you pick. But let's say I pick, what if I just pick this point right here? Okay, that's it. 2, -1. Oh, you can't really see the green ink. Let me go back to red. Okay, that's it. 2, -1. Okay? So this is the point, that's the x, and that's the y, that I'm going to plug back in to this. So instead of y, I'm going to plug in -1 from down here is less than or equal to 2 times, and instead of x, I'm going to plug in the number I picked for x, 2, minus 3. So then we can check it. -1 less than or equal to 2 times 2 is 4 minus 3. So 4 minus 3 is 1. Is -1 less than or equal to 1? Yes, -1 is smaller than 1. So this is good. So since this is true, then it means that we did our math right. Okay. We're happy about that. So make sure you get all this work copied down into your notes. Okay, and that was just a screen for if I wanted to use more space to check. Okay, let's try this one. Step 1, we would solve for y. But that's already been done for us. It already has y on one side of the inequality and everything else on the other side. So we're done there. 2, graph. Okay, so now we're going to graph this little line right here. So first we look at the y-intercept. It's at +1, so we go to 1 on the y-axis and we put a dot. And then we count out our slope. Our slope is -1 over 2. That's the rise over the run. So from this dot, we're going to go -1. So down 1 and to the right 2, and we'll put another dot. Now we have to decide, are we going to connect these dots with a solid line or with a dashed line? So we look at this inequality symbol right here. And since there's no equal to sign on it, okay, that means we're going to put a dashed line. So dash, dash, dash. Like that. Okay? And then this is a greater than sign. Y is bigger than everything else. Y is greater than. The alligator is eating the y. So since the alligator is eating the y is greater than, we shade everything in above our line. So you just start at the line and you shade in up like that. Okay? Oh, so that was step 3. We shaded it in. Okay, and then step 4 is to check to make sure that we did our math right. So we just pick a point somewhere in here, somewhere in the shaded region. So we could even pick 1, 1. Okay, we could pick this point right here, and that's at 1, 1. Here's our x, here's our y, and we can plug these numbers back in. So instead of y, I can plug in 1. And instead of x, I can plug in another 1 plus 1. So 1 should be greater than -1/2 times 1 is -1/2 plus 1 And negative half plus 1, that's like 1 minus a half, so that's just a half. So 1 is bigger than a half. Is 1 bigger than a half? Yes, that's true, so we did our math correctly. We could plug in these two numbers into there and get out the right thing. Or you could pick any point in here and plug it in to there and get out the right thing. Make your inequality be true. Okay, and there was more space for checking. All right, now you try. Pause the video and you try this problem. If you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. They say that you can use the point 0, 0 if you want. You could, but I think it's easier to do it the way I've been showing you. All right, so now we're going to graph this linear inequality. And this time it's not solved for y, so we really are going to have to do step number 1, which is solve for y. Well, I shouldn't have written it right there because I'm going to need to work in that space. Let's fix that. Okay, so step 1 was solve for y. Okay, so I want to solve this for y. I want to get y all by itself. So the first thing I have to do is move this 5x over here. It's positive now, so I'm going to move it by subtracting it on both sides. So that's negative 5x minus 8. And then I've got to split up the 2 and the y. They're getting multiplied now, so I split them up by dividing everything by 2. Everything gets divided by 2. So then I get y is greater than negative 5 halves x, and negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So there's step 1. Step 2, graph. Okay, so I'm going to graph this line. First I look at my y-intercept, that's negative 4, so I go to negative 4 on the y-axis and I put a dot. And then my slope is negative 5 halves. So from this dot, I'm going to have to go down negative 5, which is going to be a little bit hard, but we can do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And then I have to run to the right 2. 1, 2. Okay, and I'll put a new dot there. And then I'm going to decide, am I going to connect these two dots with a dotted line or with a dashed line? Well, since this inequality right here doesn't have an equal sign, okay, it's just plain, there's no little equals part underneath it, that means we're going to connect it with a dashed line. Remember when we did inequalities and we had number lines? If you had this kind, you would put a circle, and if you had the one with the equal sign, you would put a dot. It's kind of the same thing. Dashed lines are like circles, and then solid lines are like dots. Okay, so here's our line. And then y is bigger than all of this. So since the alligator's eating the y is bigger than, I want to shade up from the line. So from the line, I'm going to go up. So I'm going to go bigger than the line, basically. Okay? So that was step 3. Shade. Okay? And then step 4 is check. So we'll have to use the other piece of paper for checking. But we just pick a dot somewhere here in this shaded region. So this time we could pick 0, 0 right there. Okay, so let's say that we picked 0, 0, and that's our xy. Okay, so remember, this is our formula. Y is greater than negative 5 halves x minus 4. Okay, so y is greater than negative 5 halves x minus 4. And the point that we picked was 0, 0. Okay, so now we'll plug in these things. So instead of y, we're going to plug in 0 is greater than negative 5 halves. And instead of x, we're going to plug in 0 minus 4. So it's 0. When you multiply these two together, anything times 0 is 0, so we can just cross that out. Okay, so is 0 bigger than negative 4? Yes, negative 4 is on the negative side, so it's smaller than 0. So this is true, which means we did our math right. Make sure you get all that copied down. Okay? Why don't you try this one? I think that you are ready to try this one, so remember your steps. First, you got to solve for y. So first you solve this for y, make it say y equals. Okay, remember that's like a 1 in front of the y. You're going to need to know that later. Step 2, graph. Do you think you're going to use a dotted line or a solid line here? Based on that, I think you're going to graph with a solid line because it's got that equals 2 sign underneath it. Step 3, you'll shade. So if y is bigger than, then you shade above the line you drew, and if it's smaller than, you shade below the line you drew. And then step 4 is to pick a spot in the shaded area and get the coordinate, and then plug your x and y back in here to make sure that you did your math right. Okay, so you do the math. All right, don't just copy this down. Actually do all the math, do your graph, and see if you got it right. If you have questions, raise your hand. Okay, and now here's another one for you to try. And again, the same 4 steps. Solve for y, graph, graph. Step 3 is shade it in, and then step 4 is check. And on your graph, do you think you're going to use a solid line or a dotted line? Well, you don't have an equal to sign in there. You don't have the little line underneath there. So you're going to have to use a dotted line this time, or a dashed line, however you look at it. Oh, okay. And now we're going to write the inequality ourselves. So they gave us a graph, and this time we're going to write the inequality. So first we need to figure out what is the equation for this line. Okay, so first we need to find out what's the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, and it crosses it right here at 2. So we know that our y-intercept is 2. And we know the letter that goes with y-intercept is b. You remember that from the y equals mx plus b. Well, your y-intercept is b. And then we need to get the slope. So let's find 2 points that are definitely on the line. This one's definitely on the line. And this one's definitely on the line. Okay? So this point is negative 3, 0. And this point is 0, 2. So then our slope, we can use our slope formula. Okay, so this can be x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2 is 2 minus y1 is 0 over x2 is 0 minus x1 is negative 3. So we're minusing negative 3, which is the same as adding 3. 2 minus 0, 2, and 0 plus 3 is 3. So our slope is 2 over 3, and that's the m. Okay? So if we were going to fill in this y equals mx plus b, we have our b, we have our slope, so we can just fill that in. Let's fill that in over here. Y equals, and instead of m, we're going to put the slope, so 2/3 times x, and instead of b, we're going to put plus 2. So this is the line equation. But we don't want to put that equal sign there. We want to put an inequality sign. Okay. So we got to decide what we're going to put in here. Since they shaded above the line, see how we went from the line and we went up? Okay, that means that y, the alligator is going to eat the y. The y is going to be bigger. Okay? Shading up means that the alligator eats the y and the y is bigger. And since this is a dashed line, we know that we're not going to put an equal sign under here. We're just going to leave it the way it is. So we end up with this inequality right here. Okay? This time, why don't you go ahead and try it? So first you figure out your y-intercept. That's where the y crosses the x-axis. Okay? And then you figure out your slope. You get 2 points that are on the line, and you use your slope equation. Okay, and then you write it out. Did we shade above or below the line? And that's going to tell you if we use the less than sign or the greater than sign. And did we use a solid line or a dotted line? And that's going to tell you if we put the little equals line underneath the inequality or not. Okay, so you try it, do it in your notes, and if you have any questions, raise your hand. Otherwise, that's the end of the lesson, and thanks for watching.